Okay, so hello everyone. Good afternoon, and apologies for a slight delay. And I would like to welcome you all to the final event of this year's conference, the roundtable discussion entitled Transition to Sustainable Technologies and Societies.
But before we begin, we would like to invite the Dean of the Faculty of Arts, Professor Mojca Schlamberger-Brezer, to say a few words.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, dear guests here and on the Zoom, please feel welcome at the last event of the 19th International Conference on Environmental, Cultural, Economic and Social Sustainability at the Faculty of Arts of Ljubljana University. Congratulations to the Department of Ethnology and Cultural Anthropology for the organization of the event and for bringing us so many well-known experts in the field who were discussing the issues for the last 3 days. I am greeting our eminent guests who will be intervening today on the roundtable Transition to Sustainable Technologies and Societies, Professor Dr. Lučka Kajfež-Bogataj, Professor Dr. Rajko Muršić, Dr. Janez Potočnik, co-chair of UNEP Environmental International Resource Panel, Slovenia, Dr. Emilija Stojmenova-Duh, the Minister of Digital Transformation, who will be coming soon, I hope, Mr. Tomislav Tkalec from the Ministry of the Environment, Climate and Energy, from the Sector for Renewable Energy Sources, Slovenia, and Jure Veteršek from Institute for Innovation and Development of University of Ljubljana in the role of moderator. I hope you will have also some tour in Ljubljana, or you already had, and that you enjoyed the meeting in Slovenia. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. These 3 days, we have heard a lot about sustainability issues and concepts from various disciplinary perspectives. This roundtable discussion aims to bring scholarly discussion in dialogue with the governmental and non-governmental sector in order to reflect on how technological and social changes might go hand in hand.
And at this conference, we talked a lot about local solutions. So continuing this idea, the roundtable discussion will, amongst other more global things, touch also upon Slovene contexts and perspectives. And in light of this, it's our honor to welcome the speakers.
So to again introduce everyone, joining us today are Lučka Kajfež-Bogataj. He's a professor at the Biotechnological Faculty at the University of Ljubljana. Her research focuses on the field of climate change and applied meteorology, especially the impact of weather and climate change on plant production and humans. In 2007, as a member of the EU International Panel on Climate Change, she has become a joint recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize.
Rajko Muršić is a professor at the Faculty of Arts, University of Ljubljana. His research interests include methodology of anthropological research, theories of culture, epistemology, urban anthropology, sensory studies, and digital ethnography. He is an author of innumerable articles, several monographs, and edited volumes. As well, he is one of the most prominent public intellectuals in Slovenia.
Dr. Janez Potočnik obtained his PhD at the Faculty of Economics, University of Ljubljana. Amongst his numerous public office positions at the national and European level, he served as the commissioner responsible for science and research, and later as the commissioner for the environment at the European Commission. Currently, he is a special advisor on sustainability to the Commissioner for Environment, Ocean and Fisheries, Virgilius Sikenvicius. Dr. Potočnik is joining us from Brussels via Zoom.
Emilija Stojmenova-Duh, who's not here yet, is an associate professor at the Faculty of Electrical Engineering, University of Ljubljana. Her research interests include digitalization for sustainable innovation and rural development. She served as a member of the management board of the Slovenian Research Agency and member of the expert council of the Employment Service of Slovenia. Currently, she's serving as Minister of Digital Transformation, and we all hope that she will join us soon here.
Dr. Tomislav Kalec obtained his PhD in 2016 with a dissertation on political aspects of decentralization of electricity generation. He has rich experiences working on the topics of energy transition, renewables, community-based renewable energy sources, energy efficiency, and energy poverty, as well as working on policy process related to energy efficiency and renewables in Slovenia and the EU. Recently, he became the head of the sector for renewable energy sources at the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Energy.
And lastly, we would like to welcome the moderator of the roundtable discussion, Master of Mechanical Engineering, Jure Veteršek. He's a researcher and a project leader at the Institute for Innovation and Development of University of Ljubljana, where he focuses on energy renovation measures, improving energy efficiency and energy saving in buildings. So with this, we give the floor to Professor Muršić, who will introduce the discussion with a short presentation.
Welcome, everybody. I'm not sure if I will be able to see my own presentation. I had in mind just to introduce a couple of thoughts to provoke thinking beyond technology and beyond, let's say, everyday discourse we are facing mostly in media, simply to think about issues that are indeed important related to sustainability itself. So my point is, if we start with technology, there used to be one very sustainable line of technology. It's called hand-axe technology, which started 1,600,000 years ago in Africa, of course, and it lasted almost until the beginning of our, well, it even lasted more than the beginning of our species at around 200,000 years ago. So we do have a long, very long time or deep time frame in technology, which didn't change much in this almost 1.5 million years. And nobody knows exactly what was related socially to this technology. But coming further from this technology is the question, is technology something that can solve our problems and all issues? I'm not sure if we are proceeding further. Yes, you are. If you are the first one, you just push down, and if you are still a technology, it is okay. So the point in technology is, okay, we need technology and technological solutions, but how far can we go and what can we hope from it? So actually, what we actually need is a rethinking of technological aspects in our human, let's say, reality or construction of the future. So I guess we can now go further to sustainability. And I played with ideas to say, well, what is sustainable? Well, what we are facing as sustainable is actually unsustainable in its essence. And permanent destruction of human life and human environment. I'm not sure if we are at this point at the moment in the presentation or not, but let's go further to these issues and questions we are actually facing. So what is sustainable and how far can we go with these sustainability issues? It means we have to invent at least some things that are not visible at the first moment. I'm not sure which one is now. We are at unsustainability, and it is obviously we have at least two different, this will help a lot. We have at least two different issues in this unsustainability: exploitation of culture which of nature, which includes humanity. We exploit not only nature, but humanity itself at the same time. And the second one, as a very good example of unsustainable approaches, is projects. The project, the very essential meaning of any project, I mentioned here European Union projects, which are now the core of our development actually throughout Europe. They are meant to simply fulfill one mission and then they end. And they are per definition unsustainable. But we simply don't notice anymore how unsustainable way we are actually acting and doing things. So let us go further. In society of Homo economicus, or economy, the very ancient distinction, and this is extremely important, and this is the main point I'm trying to stress here, is in ancient Greek times, there was a huge division or conceptual and practical division between oikos and polis. Oikos is the term from which we derive economy and ecology. Polis is politics. I mean, later politics, this means state formation. So who were people who were mostly, how to say it, keen to do things in oikos? Idiotes, idiots. And who were people who were deeply into polis? It was polites, polites, so people of care for other people. So this division between idiots and, let's say, politically aware human beings, and Aristotle would say that a human being is per definition a human being who cares for other people by political means, is something that is missing. We are permanently occupied only with oikos. We don't have politics anymore. Whatever we nowadays understand as politics is not politics, it's oikos. It is something that will simply fulfill the needs of those who are in power and nothing else. So we have obviously capitalist creative destruction. And here we have this BDP versus Human Development Index. And we have some indicators of well-being. I will not show you the Slovenian case because I don't want to be too long in this, but there are some other ways of measuring it, and we will talk about this a bit later. And of course, we have various forms of capital, and sources of the growth are actually not only human labor, which is usually considered as a source of growth. It is capital itself, capital in circulation, which create new capital. This is important part of second and third book of Marx Capital. And if we don't understand this, then we can't change much because we are only related to human labor and oikos, as I told you before. So, these were a couple of thoughts I was willing to share with you at this beginning, just to make it clear that when we are talking about sustainability, we are talking about politics. Politics, and again, politics in Aristotelian sense, which means use of human public mind. And that's it.
Thank you for introductory intervention. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. Do you hear me okay? Okay. Okay, my background is engineering, but I have some experience with social science and humanities, mainly from interdisciplinary European R&D projects, which are, yes, they end, but in each project we try to come up with something we say key exploitable results. So to come up with something that will live longer than the project itself. My role in these projects and also some other fields is facilitation of collaboration between sectors and between disciplines. This is usually quite a task because disciplines like to work only in their field, going out to the open to communicate with other disciplines or other sectors is a challenge. This roundtable was planned more than a year ago, and it was intended to bring together these four sectors, academia, industry, NGOs, and public administration. In this time, some things changed, and 3 of our invited speakers became part of, let's say, public administration, or the field that you expose that is most relevant in framing, let's say, in doing policy framework that sets the way we live and determines our life. So I'm quite optimistic, and I think that maybe from this some actual implications can come that will influence future policy development and bring us closer to sustainability. We are all shaped by our experience and our past. So if possible, I would ask you not to participate in this debate as representatives of institutions that you work for, but as individual beings shaped by everything, by your experience and past work. So not to speak as institutions, this is relevant for the ministry, or, but as human beings. So to start with the green tech, and the first question will go to Dr. Potočnik. As we hear, we need to think about systemic changes and also changes in social practices. We have a perspective of some global agreements that try to, at the moment, not very successfully change global problems we are facing, from climate change, biodiversity, and so on. At the moment, this transition is marked only by the green tech or green technology. And this is again connected with economic models. So we are talking about green growth, which is by definition not sustainable. So, but here in the room, we have also colleagues from Bhutan that use some other practices and have different contexts and views on how to measure development and what is important on the end. So I would like Dr. Potočnik to reflect firstly on the indicators we use to measure development, which are like ecological footprint, often mentioned GDP, and underlying social and political structures. So can we use some other indicators to measure development? It's first question for Dr. Potočnik, if he hears us.
I'm hearing you well, Jure. I hope you are also hearing me well. First, hi to everybody. Thank you for the invitation and the trust. It's great to be with you. Starting from the very nice explanation of the slides of Dr. Marušić, I would identify myself as a polite idiot because my education is economics, but I try to be as much polite as possible, in particularly defending the public interest. If I start with indicators, or better to say indicator, because we are more or less using gross domestic product, GDP, and GDP, it's certainly not an indicator which is a good measure for human well-being. And it's a kind of compass sending us in the wrong direction. This is now recently recognized also at the United States level, so where the Secretary General has just recently initiated a new effort that we would move beyond the GDP. Even more paradoxically, we are mainly using the growth rates, not even the level achieved, which at the end of the day, it's the only one which is important, because you can't go to any shop and say, I'm growing 10%, give me this and this. It's factually how much it's your level which you have achieved. So GDP, or better to say, the market value of all final products and services, what GDP is, it's certainly not a measure of society's well-being and has never been recognized as such, even by the author, Kuznets, from the very beginning. It does not show the level of, for example, stratification of the society. It does not measure the damage which we are causing to the environment, even more the destruction of the environment, which is not valued by the markets, actually leads many times to a higher gross domestic product. We have in economy different kind of measurements which are actually done, and I don't want to go into deep into that. Maybe just to say that, for example, Inclusive Wealth Index, which is taking into consideration production, human and nature part, it's actually showing us that more or less in the last 20 years or so, the GDP growth was achieved at the cost of depleting the natural capital. But if I very quickly move from indicators to current socio-political structure, which you mentioned, the conclusion there, it's for me pretty much the same. The current socio-political structure, it's simply not leading to sustainable and secure future. So the questions related to needed system change are absolutely the right ones. From how democracies function to how we could and should fix the existing inequalities, to the current economic system, which it's basically considering humans as superior and not as part of the nature. And I could continue. Unfortunately, there are no quick fixes, no easy ones. Altogether, it's too deep in the existing system, and it's too much driven by the current interests.
Thank you. Now I would shift to Professor Muršić, and the question is connected with our colleagues from Bhutan. We need to think what can we need to act together, solving climate crisis, biodiversity crisis, and other global problems we have. How to do this in equal and fair way? What can we learn from other societies? We look mostly from our perspective, Europocentric, let's say. But there are some other aspects of life that we are neglecting. Can we act together? What can we learn from, let's say, other colleagues?
Yes, as I mentioned before, we have to learn things from the past, from the human past in general human evolution, which is far from being clear and certain. One thing is for sure, neither economy nor violent political power had been the core of human success in evolutionary sense. It was actually completely different. It was solidarity, which was basically the issue of human progress, and it remained so. It is even the core of our societies at the present. This is something I can say from anthropological perspective. We are privileged to have a group of our colleagues from Bhutan, and I asked them to present their own system of evaluating well-being called happiness index. And I think we have to learn at least some parts from them. So I'm pleased to invite a colleague from Bhutan who will give a very short presentation of it.
Good afternoon, honorable panels, scholars, academics, researchers, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for this opportunity actually to participate in this conference and also to share my personal view on GNH or gross national happiness. I say my personal view because we are 18 colleagues here, but none of us are GNH scholars. And often we live in water and when we don't feel the rain. So we live in a society where we pursue happiness as the national goal, but we really do not really get into the analyzing and reflection on how GNH is measured in the country. Nevertheless, just to give you a general premise on how the GNH actually is looked upon in our country. Before that, I think it's also, I assume that some of our ladies and gentlemen here may not be so much aware about the country called Bhutan. So just to give a brief introduction to my country, it is located between China and India. So it is north of India and south of China. It's a small country stretching around like just over 38,000 square kilometer with the population of 7,000 770,000 and just over that people. And just to give a picture of Bhutan, when we talk about pursuing happiness, often it is so romanticized that Bhutanese are looked as the happiest people and Bhutan is looked upon as a paradise of happiness. But I just want to dismiss that and dispel that feeling. So just to give the backdrop, for now, the country's economy, like per capita income is around 3,300 and something dollars. And of 770,000 people, the unemployment rate is around 4.8, of which around 80,000 are counted as youth and 20% of the youth are unemployed. So with this social background, I think you already picture out that Bhutan is not so different in terms of featuring when we talk about the underdeveloping country or developing country. So Bhutan is still struggling and it has its own social and economic problem. But one thing that Bhutan is proud about is as we navigate through this, the world that I think the panel are talking about today, I think Bhutan is pursuing not really the GDP as our goal, gross national. We look as the happiness as our end goal. So the country has formulated based on the wisdom of our visionary monarch, His Majesty, the fourth King, Jimmy Sengye Wanchu. So gross national happiness is considered more important than gross national product. So picking up from that line spelled in 1972 or something, now the government has actually the Bhutan has somehow pursued it, that as the national goal, and it is used as the philosophy or the ideology of the development in the country. So gross national happiness, what is gross national happiness? Now, it is founded on the premise of the principle that actually the developmental resources or the capital goes beyond economy capital. There are also like human capital, there are also like natural resource capital, the social capital, and many more to make the developmental holistic. That is the view. So in order to measure happiness, just to give you a very brief account, I will make it into two. One, how happiness is measured, and another, how happiness is taken down to the policy level. So the first thing is like to measure happiness, it is the human happiness or the human need is put under four categories, or sometimes we call that as four pillars of gross national happiness. Those are culture, socioeconomic development, sustainable development, then the good governance and the cultural diversity or the cultural preservation and conservation. So under these four pillars, then the domains are categorized. It is broken down into 9 domains, which measures like use of time, psychological well-being, community well-being, community vitality, good governance, health, education, and living standard and ecological diversity and resilience. So happiness is measured based on these 9 domains generally. So how do we go about that? Now, periodic survey is being conducted where these 9 domains are broken down into 123 indicators, but of which 33 indicators are equally distributed under this 9 domain. And the survey is conducted with a scale from 0 to 1, 0 as the minimum and 1 as highest. So going around, then people, the survey actually measures how people actually respond to their use of time, their psychological well-being, which are broken down further, which I think may not be so necessary to break into the nuances right now here. So, but that doesn't alone give the picture of happiness. So just to illustrate that, what happens is there is a threshold for happiness again set at the indicator level as well as at the domain level. So for example, in 2010, in the Living Standard Survey, the poverty line for the nation was around, in survey, it was around 1,700 niltrum. That is our currency. When put together, it becomes like 20,000 something in a year. I think, yeah, 20,000 something. But the national, that GNH threshold was somewhere like 28,000 something. So when people do not meet that threshold, then they fall below the happiness level. So that is one way of measuring the happiness for the Bhutanese people. I don't know if I could make it clear. Now, to give you a general picture of how public policy actually recruit that idea of GNH and takes down in the developmental processes to people, any Bhutanese policies developed by any organization goes under the screening tool. There is a commission set like Gross National Commission. Now it is put under another ministry and it is made into division, but the unit is still exit. So every policy has to somehow go through the screening process of gross national happiness, where the 9 domain is used to screen. And of the 9 domain, at least 6 domains have to be fulfilled by the policies to be revised or used or implemented. So there is no policy that doesn't really include that GNH values, GNH principle to be implemented. And that also falls to the government. When the government identify though Bhutan is a democratic country, the government, even the government's policy, the government's, even when the government identify their key result area for 5-year planning, they have to undergo the same screening too. So this is a general picture of how the happiness is measured in the country and how happiness is taken down to the people. So thank you.
Thank you very much for this intervention. It seems a good idea to do screening of policy implications in such way. When thinking about sustainability, besides introducing new green tech, we need to think also about changing social practices. As we saw in COVID time, the behavior and consumption patterns can be changed relatively fast by the state. We're all waiting what the government will say in the evening, what the new rules for the next day will be valid. So we saw in practice, things can happen fast. We are at the moment strongly relying on technology to solve everything, but technology diffusion takes time. We are a bit biased by the applications because everyone can download the new application fast, but changes in physical world take time. Technology of renewables, of other green tech takes time to be implemented. But always innovation and deployment of new ideas goes hand in hand with changing of social practices. Now, a question to Dr. Tkalets. How would you see the change of social practices that can work together with green tech?
Thank you. Hello from my side as well. I mostly, my professional life is concerned with more or less the energy sector and also research-wise, and we see problems there because it's not related only to technology and social practices, but also to politics and power relations between actors and other aspects. And speaking about the energy sector, I will more or less focus on that, but still it has broader implications. Who wants to run the energy sector? Who wants to be the only one called that can make the decisions in the energy sector? So the energy experts, engineers. the only ones, because they think it's a technical system, but it's not. It's socio-technical system. It has, of course, the infrastructure, it has the technologies, it has the practices on how to use the technology, but it also includes actors, connections between actors, institutions. And we have to add to this the broader frame of infrastructure, of knowledge, of political structure, business structure, social structure. And then we see it's all interrelated. So it's not important only what kind of technology we have, but it's also important if we will make the decision to use this technology and how we will use this technology. And we can just focus then on the, let's say, the infrastructure of knowledge. So we have the faculties, we have universities where engineers get knowledge. So if we have, let's say, a professor that is teaching the new students technology-wise, some implications that are not progressive and that are, let's say, stuck in the 90s. And we have new generations of students coming with the same knowledge and same impressions that some of the solutions are not possible, but in the end they are. It is seen as a big obstacle to change. So I was researching a lot on what are the main obstacles when it comes to energy transitions, to green energy transitions, let's say. And okay, on the one side, we have the technological obstacles. We don't have a lot of different new technologies. We're still not in the Star Trek mode with more or less free and abundant energy. And we will never be there. And of course, we have some economic obstacles. We cannot afford everything because we live in a, let's say, economical system that has boundaries. But the most important obstacles are here in the social dimensions or side. So we have obstacles on the personal, on individuals. So it is important who runs the game, who is the actor in power, because he makes the decisions. So it's important what he thinks, what are his norms or beliefs, because he will base his solutions and actions based on his norms and beliefs. So if we have a director of an energy company that thinks that we will run coal until 2050, they will build another coal block in Slovenia. And in 2 years, the decision will be made that they will have to close it 20 years earlier. So it is important who runs the game. Then we go from this individual level to institutional level. So you have this personal aspect getting into the institutional, plus you have many other obstacles on the institutional side, because the institution was set in one time frame or one zeitgeist. When changes happen, the institutions have to change as well, but we don't see that often. And there's a saying, you can make a new institution easily, but you cannot close it, never, almost. Then we go to the, let's say, this policy arena, where you have the institutional obstacles coming in, plus the policy and politics aspects and obstacles as well. And then we come to the whole socio-technical systems, where you add the technical and the economic obstacles. So we see the main problems come mainly from this social side. But the ones who are running the energy system, so the engineers, think only this small part of obstacles are important and are not dealing with these ones.
Thank you. It's a differentiation between science and technology. And humanistic science is something completely different than technology, which is changing fast, and also the ways how we teach them, what are the state of the art, this is changing. A question for Professor Lučka. How can we solve this, or what can we do about the conflict between changing practices in, let's say, food production, energy, mobility, and introducing new tech? What can we do about this?
Yeah, this is an important question, no doubt. But I guess that solving multiple crises and solving any problem actually needs knowledge, not just engineering knowledge, but knowledge in general. So we need literacy. Literacy in, I'm often talking about climate change literacy, about energy literacy. Otherwise, we will not be able to be democratic society anymore. And I would just ask the audience, you are from different countries, different age. Do you know your energy needs? Do you know how many kilowatt hours per day you need to exist or to lead the way, the life you are having? If I put that question to my students who are 19 to 20 years old, some even very successful at middle school, they have not the slightest idea. 100 kilowatt hours, 10 kilowatt hours, 1,000 kilowatt hours. And then I asked them, do you know at age of 19 in Slovenia, I'm talking now, have you ever had in your hands electricity bill? Or they say that mama pays it or father pays it, not aware. What I want to illustrate is that structures of power, they're very interested, that people are not very literate about climate, about energy. Sometimes I remember times where we were paying electricity bill every month the same amount. And at the end of the year, okay, there were some, you had to come to the bill. But what were the impression people got? Whether I save energy, when I turn the thermostat, I pay the same. So it doesn't really matter. So what I want to say is that we have to change education system. I joke sometimes because when we have this arbitratura, when we choose the what are the most important knowledge our children should have, is usually mother language, English, mathematics, or something else. But I would put it energy efficiency would be something that they should emphasize about. So yes, knowledge different, but the problem is then we have a generation of students or children who know more about sustainability than our leaders of government, because people over 50, they never learned about climate change, they never learned about things very important now. So it's not just about education system, it's also when somebody, that's my idea, when somebody gets to the power, for instance, when you're elected as an MP or European parliamentarian, there are always a few months time before you really start your job. You should go to school then. You should really teach about things you will then decide for 4 years, for the whole Europe or for the whole country. So maybe I'm naive, but I think that we should start there, but also long time learning. And of course, changing of the political system from capitalism to something else would also help. I would just like to comment about Bhutan index, what I'm already speaking, is a wonderful achievement, but you should be more proud about other facts. It was not mentioned today that you're the only country in the world that is carbon, not neutral, but carbon negative. So this is something that you should also tell people how you achieve that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. As a technologist, I need to go back to technology. So, technology implementation or changes are always related to market conditions, and the market is set by the rules that is stimulating a fair competition. So there's no, to be clear, there's no such thing as free market. There are always rules that govern the market, and these are state interventions. That's why we need long-term planning. For example, photovoltaic electricity was not cost efficient until very recently, a few years ago, but there was long-term support for this to make it cost efficient. At the moment, we see that a lot of success in changing social practices is done by marketing, and marketing is strongly dominated at the moment by social platforms. Unfortunately, their optimization goal is only to consume more. Now, a question to Dr. Potočnik. What can be done that technologies that we are introducing become enablers of sustainable social practices?
Yeah, maybe to put it a bit in the context, an effort to sustainable social practice in economic world is known under circular economy efforts. This is for me a kind of an instrument for strengthening resilience, strategic autonomy if you want, but also as part of the bigger picture of economic, societal, cultural transformation needed if we want to achieve the European Green Deal and Sustainable Development Goals. So why circular economy? That you would not look too strange to it, because it's the oldest concept on the planet Earth. So nature is basically the bioeconomy based on the principles of circularity, where nothing is lost and everything has its own purpose. Of course, in that context, technologies, in particular digitalization, which would be certainly underlined by Emilia if she would be joining us, could be and are already an important enabler for sustainable social practices, like, for example, service economy, sharing mobility, energy transition, retaining value in the materials, or empowering consumers so that we know all the necessary information and so on. But what are, and I will really stay on a broad surface, what for me would be the core conditions to make technologies part of the sustainable efforts. And these are pretty much the things I will touch them a bit in the context of our recent International Resource Panel efforts. There are three major changes which we basically need if we want to put the things in order. First is, we need to move from humans in function of economic success and development to an economy in function of delivering human needs, our functionalities. Because so currently we have upside down the situation. So we are somehow serving economy instead, economy would be serving us. Second, we need to move from an economy considering humans as external and superior to nature, as I have mentioned already before, to an economy acknowledging that we are embedded with nature. And finally, we need to move from an egoistic, short-term based interest and not fit for purpose governance structures and also logic to cooperation, to sharing sovereignty, understanding that sharing sovereignty is the best way to keep sovereignty. We need an intergenerational pact agreement with the young generation, which because if we do not improve our collective resilience, we are actually indebting them so deeply that we are ruining their very future. In short, we would need to move from an extraction-based production economy to a creative-based production and economy. In the global resource outlook in IRP, we are shifting the whole logic of our global resource outlook for 24. It will be released at UNIA 24, that we are not looking to maximizing the output of the economic sectors, but we are looking how with the least use of energy and materials, we can meet human needs, which is totally upside down story as currently the markets actually work. From the lessons which we have learned recently, in particular last year, from the terrible war, from the pandemic, from the hottest summer, we can really see and understand that changing our relationship with nature is not only environmental imperative, it's ultimately very much economic security and resilience imperative. And this relationship, it's simply not stable, it's not balanced, and it will be resolved either with collective wisdom and effort or in a hard way, which is very painful, through conflicts, through pandemics, through migration. And only if you are entirely blind today, you cannot see that this is already actually happening. Yeah, this goes a bit broader than the question you asked. But if you look only to technological solutions and overlook all the necessary conditions which we have to set, that the technological solutions will actually end on the fertile ground, we will simply miss the point.
Thank you. This goes very good into next section. we need to ask ourselves who serves who. Economos, to my narrow understanding, means taking care of home. So why do we have economy and so on? It's not to make profit, but to take care of us. Would like to, I would need now some reflection now on needs versus wants. We need to differentiate between what we actually need and what are desires or wishes that are created by marketing and they are presented as needs. One example could be maybe electric car versus mobility. Do we need to replace existing cars with electric, or is our need mobility? We need to think what is useful, what is needed, and on the other side, what has a marketing value. This is now a question for all four. We need to think how can we limit ourselves in consumption of goods and energy. I referred to Professor Eriksson in the morning today. He showed how the trade and amount of goods is growing rapidly. So this is obviously unsustainable. Can we consider the concept of degrowth? So shrinking our economic activity as our main. We know that the report from Club of Rome came out 50 years ago and things were known 50 years ago, more or less. So could you reflect on the perspective of degrowth and possibilities that are maybe post-sustainable? I would start with Professor Muršić.
Okay, I hoped to be the last one because I have some opinion about it. I don't think we can have any magic stick that will work out in this effort. We have much more serious problems to be solved as easily as with degrowth or with a circular economy or whichever idea comes from the leaders of world economy. They had their chance, and I think economy is something that is obviously at the moment obsolete. We can't even think about solutions coming from economy. So from my perspective, issues are much worse. So if I was reminded about knowledge of these issues about climate change, I came across this first data in the late 70s. I was very much interested in astronomy and physics and so on. Estimations about climate change were much lower than what we measured actually in past few decades. So at least I still think it is not only human produced problems, but still it is mainly a human problem we will face in the future. And relying on economy is the same as if you put more oil to fuel to fire. It is not a solution to think about any kind of economy which will help. The second issue here is technology. We always have a kind of a very strange idea for me that technology is something related to nature. It is not. From the very beginning to the end, all technology is human created, and it is part of human created reality. As a matter of fact, the very term from which we derive technology, techne in ancient Greek, would be the same term used for arts. I'm always shocked when I notice that kids coming to school have never heard of it. But technology and arts have the same root. It is basically the same in its essence. It doesn't matter that you need a lot of mathematics to calculate the working of machines. Machines are our products as much as music is our art, as simple as that. So technology is, of course, it has some advantages and disadvantages. But when you are trying to consider the future of humanity, now I'm trying to think as anthropologist, having in mind humanity, not existing economies or existing states or existing powers or whatever, existing industries. I have to say that are we at the moment forced to think of our future, if there is any future for humanity at all? If we are at this step at the moment, I'm not sure. I'm still optimist, but it is possible that we crossed the line, which is much more serious than anybody thinks in this room. Then we have to put very serious questions. Should we proceed the same way or not? And the answer is obviously not. But do we have any alternative to what we already have? This is completely another issue. And I must say, in that sense, I'm optimist. Whenever we have a kind of a natural disaster situation, people always rely on solidarity with each other and find short-term solutions in quite typical situation of community building. And I see future much, much beyond all these frames we were thinking and talking about. But I still think technology is not so bad if we take it seriously enough as human product meant for other human beings, and of course for the situation in the world in its essence, holistically speaking. So we have to be optimistic in many different ways, but we can't even think about any kind of improvement without thinking beyond. That means beyond capitalism and beyond existing systems of power.
Yeah, well, back to the question of future. I mean, future models and future in general. I always think about future in plural. We have futures, and it's pretty much up to us which future we will choose. To be very simple about these futures, there's future that is a simple continuation of what we are experiencing today. There's future that we fear of, is black future, or how should I call it? We all know what can happen, and this is a reason for concern. But there's also a future that we want. So, but this future we want will not happen by itself. We have to try hard to achieve that. So there is a reason for optimism as well. I agree to a certain point that economical models that we are, the choice of them is, there are many, not just circular economy, but I see all these new economies that have one important dimension, and this is not just human solidarity, but sharing, because if we want to economize or optimize the resources, sooner or later we will have to share things. So sharing not just a car, sharing a lot of things. And can you imagine a European man? We are not now in Slovenia, so I will not talk about Slovenians. Let's talk about German. Typical German man sharing his car. There was also a poll asking them a few years ago whether they will be preparing to share car or a wife. You can imagine what was the outcome. So I guess in Slovenia probably we will have the same result. Anyway, sharing economy is a core of our future we want. About also the same goes for circular economy. But what do we need to be able to share? Okay, we need to share the same values probably, but first of all, I think we have to trust each other, because if I want to share something, mobility or whatever, I have to trust that person that will bring his car or whatever back in the same condition. So we are completely lacking the trust. And is the same issue in UN when you find 190 countries talking about climate change measures, how to lower emissions. they don't trust each other. The soon they went out of the room, they have special deals. So that's why we are not going anywhere with the international agreements. We don't have global governance, we don't have trust. So to solve crises like climate change or biodiversity, by putting your flag, Slovenian flag, and Bhutan flag, and saying, well, my sovereignty is here and I'm able to do on my territory whatever I want, assuming that there's a wall and CO2 doesn't cross from China to Europe or vice versa. I mean, yeah, we are there. And I think that we fundamentally need a model of new governance, global governance. Otherwise, we can call it planetary stewardship or whatever. We can be romantic, but otherwise we will have the growth by itself, because the system will collapse, and then it will not be our choice. It will be our bleak or black future. So we should really think more about futures, and also trying to think about scenarios. This is another thing I'm missing in the school system. For instance, scenario thinking is something that's completely lacking in our schools. I give my students sometimes homework. Let's, till the next appointment, bring 3 scenarios about your future life. And that I teach students of physics, and they are totally frustrated. And then I have to help them. Okay, one scenario is you get married, you will have a job and stay in Slovenia. Okay, the next scenario, they start to think, but this is not in our nature, to be more flexible about futures that are out there.
Yeah, just maybe adding 2 more layers, but beneath what was said, not above. So speaking about energy, we see currently we are in a major fossil crisis because of climate change. And the main discourses go, of course, emphasizing the energy efficiency first principle, but only when speaking, not in practice, more or less. And then going to renewables, which is of course the right way, but just thinking globally on how much energy we use as civilization globally. We're speaking about, I don't know, it's abundant, it's too much. And setting here the limits of the planet, we're not inside those limits for a long time already. And now, getting these two together. So we need more renewables, but we have limits on the planet. We cannot just change all the fossil fuels with renewables and use the same amount of energy. We will do more damage to the planet. I'm still not saying that we don't need renewables. We need them, but we don't need as much energy as we use globally now. And that's the main problem. So how to fix it? Then yeah, scenarios is one of the right ways, of course, and we have to change this paradigm of preparing plans, future strategies on the national, on the global level, regional level, whatever. Because we see now there are energy plans, energy strategies on national level. All the countries in the EU need to have these national energy and climate plans. And you need to set some baselines. And these baselines just more or less go in the direction, okay, this is how much energy we use today. This is how much growth of the GDP we're expecting in the next years. That means we will need more energy. And our baseline goes when using energy just up. And all the scenarios then coming from this are just, yeah, using more energy, and we need more sources of energy and more technologies to make them. So there are new concepts arising. Of course, degrowth, donut economy is setting some limits of what we can do. Also in the energy field, energy sufficiency. So that goes from the level of society back to the individual level. So there are individuals, households, whatever, that use abundant amount of energy. So we should set some limits. What is appropriate when looking on the limits of the planet. There's also a concept of energy sobriety as well. It's similar, but still. But how to achieve that? I mean, how to set some limits on personal level if and speaking from the Slovenian perspective, so independence and changing of the system in '91, being a liberal capitalist country, so going to the West mindset, emphasizing the individual and his freedoms, and not even mentioning the responsibility of an individual living in the society on a limited planet. And how to include this part, which is really important and necessary for a long-term survival of the civilization on the planet, and how to confront it with this idea of a person of individual that he has only his freedoms and no responsibilities at all.
Dr. Potočnik?
Yeah, very quickly, because I know I should not be long on this. I think if I just comment what I have heard from the colleagues, I think there is no doubt that we need to go in the thinking beyond. That's absolute must, and it's necessary. But on the other hand, we also must be aware that we must fix what is here and now, what is driving our economies, what is driving our policies, what is driving our societies, what is driving that our democratic systems are in a situation that, for example, majority of the voters can vote for exit of Great Britain out of the European Union, which was insane. So we must, my point is, we must definitely listen and respect everybody in whatever area and everybody's effort, because many of us are basically wanting the same. And each one is trying to contribute to this same development in their best way, trying, and in politics you learn many times that the only most and best successful way is to try to put yourself in the shoes of others, trying to understand their worries and actually persuade them with their interest and language which they are using. When it comes to degrowth, there is an absolute clear, which is basically the mantra of whole International Resource Panel work, that we need to decouple economic development, well-being development, if you want, from the use of resources and both from environmental impacts which they are doing. If we are not successful in that, we will hit the wall, and we are very, very quickly coming close to hitting that wall. And the proposal, the concept which Lučka mentioned of the servitization, it's one of the really good concepts because it's actually stimulating producers to use less resources. I certainly don't have time to explain that in detail, but definitely it's a good concept. So for me, growth or degrowth, it's not actually the core question. It's basically how we measure the growth. So if you would measure it in the way like the colleague from Bhutan explained it, then probably we don't have so much problem with the degrowth concept. But of course, then we would measure it in a different way and not in a way like we are doing it today. And finally, just a comment on what Tomislav said about the energy system. Tomislav, you are entirely right, and that's pretty much also my worry. My worry is that we are now systematically and speedily shifting from an energy system which is fossil fuel based to an energy system which will be materials based. But at the same time, we are entirely ignoring the core question, where and how we can actually save the energy and materials. For example, if you look to all talks in the climate convention, they are orientated to the supply side. Nobody is asking who is consuming and who is overshooting planetary boundaries. So there it's a plan, which is of course important and necessary, that, for example, you clean up the steel industry, but nobody is asking the question how much of that steel is actually used for empty cars and empty houses, and I can continue. So these are the real questions which needs to become part of our approach. And finally, I think because I have underlined before that that International Resource Panel is going into direction of the human needs rather than actually maximizing the sector's outputs. So we have to confess that as consumers, we are massively manipulated in the direction of mass buying. But if you want to answer your question or question how much you really need, comparing of how much it's a kind of induced need, then ask yourself a simple question. How much of the clothes you were wearing during the COVID period comparing to the years before the COVID period? And you will find it that your need is pretty much limited comparing to what was actually the reality before. And you did not feel at all less happy. On the contrary, more happy because you were using not induced and imposed clothes, but rather those whom you like.
Thank you. Energy is often mentioned, so I would focus now on it. Yeah, fossil energy, easily accessible, abundant, was enabler for development of technology, civilization, and development, let's say. So energy systems are in the nexus of green transition. Green tech or sustainable energy systems should in theory be introduced by support of taxes and subsidies. But this is taking place to a limited extent. What we see now is that the fossil fuel subsidies are increasing. Also in Europe, if we look at the data from OECD and International Energy Agency, they nearly doubled to 700 billion from 20 to 21. And EA says that they are slowing progress toward the global community's climate goals. So, and most of the subsidies are used to reduce the price paid by consumers. So we are subsidizing fossil industry again. So a question for Dr. Tkalec. What can be the benefits for societies if you go to locally based renewable energy sources, renewable energy systems, compared with central mineral-based ones?
Okay, starting from the side of the locals, the beneficiaries, I mean, they can choose what they can do or what they want in their locality. So it means changing the means of technology, what source they will use, how they will use it, because it depends. It can be the same technology, but if you use it differently or in a different setting, it can have a bigger or smaller impact on the environment, on the people who live there. So it means in a way that they can have bigger environmental benefits out of it because they choose how to do it and where to do it. There can be some, I'm speaking now more on a project level, let's say. So local cohesion can happen because they're all on the same ground for the same project, or let's say for a common solar power plant or common community-based wind power plant or something like that. They can have financial benefits as well, not just on the individual level, but also on the social level. So if they're the investors in the, let's say, community-owned wind power plant, they can decide that they will get back the money that they put in, but the extra profits that would usually go to a private investor, they can use it for some kind of social funds or energy poverty funds or something like that can be used on the local level and helping those in need, or for some other kind of any other kind of way. But it goes to the upper level as well, so they can become more independent from the big profit-driven actors, and this means also some kind of democratization of the energy sector as well. So the main energy actors are losing their power because the power is gaining from the ground up, which means they will have bigger influence, not from the beginning, but looking long term and thinking about the number of this kind of, let's say, the energy communities. They can gain influence in the policy process as well. So on the policy level, also on the politics level side as well. And that can mean that's not the decisions regarding energy and energy sector will not be influenced only by the big corporate players, which usually get what they want, but also by some smaller actors if they gain in this power, and some of the decisions can go into their direction. Maybe also just to include this, it means if the whole development process is in the hands of a small number of big energy actors, that mostly means that the changes will be more based on the evolution of the system. So just adding some new bits to the already existing systems. But if you have new actors coming in, it means that some paradigm shift can happen as well. So the actors that were implementing first renewable projects in Germany were not the 4 or 5 big energy companies that were more or less owning the whole electricity sector, but smaller actors coming from all around the place, because these big 5 companies thought, okay, this is just something there on the ground. It's not a lot of money. We have the big shit here. We run the business, we don't care about it. But the number of these projects and actors got bigger, they got political influence, and some of the decisions went into their direction. So the big companies also started investing in renewables, and also had to change the way of the way the companies are working. So setting the let's say from one company make it two, the first one that will be more progressive, going into renewables, and the second one that will die in a few years, that is dealing with fossil, and in Germany nuclear as well. So they will close this, it's making losses, this one is making profit, so we'll go in this direction. So it means other actors that were not in the sector brought changes to the sector itself.
A question for you. About external costs. We know that energy production has external costs and, let's say, benefits. What are the ways we can internalize these external costs of, let's say, unsustainable energy production?
Yeah, externalities, it's something that economists don't want to hear about it, which is a pity, because I remember 20 years ago, there were not really, science was not able to calculate these externalities very correct. But now for, I guess, at least 15 years, we know pretty much for coal operated power plants, what would actually be the price of kilowatt hour. It would be finally to employing the principle of polluter pays. So this should not be paid by consumer, but by the owner of the thermal power plant. And the same calculation could also go for traffic, which is, for instance, in Slovenia, the biggest problem. We pay for the car, we pay for the road, we pay for the gas, but we don't pay for the damage, that CO2 that comes out of my car. Yes, and we calculated for Slovenia that, for instance, for every 1,000 kilometers made by personal car, this is a 60 euros of external damage that is not paid. But if you go by truck, it is almost 3 times bigger. So every truck coming across Slovenia, for 1,000 kilometers, the externality would be around 200 euros. And this money should be put into a fund that would be actually financing then all, I don't know, the road repairs or alternative modes of transportation. So there's no excuse why this could be a first step to a new economic model, because we can do that externalities, not just with energy. We can do it with food, with meat, with the eggs, with whatever we buy. And actually, it's about CO2 footprint, we can call it that, or water footprint. And I remember the idea of Janez Potočnik when he was a commissioner, that actually practically everything we buy could have a label, what is the true cost for environment. This could be the first step, that people would feel the difference if I choose that energy or that product versus another one. But even in Europe, this concept did not pass. But it would be extremely important to do it as an exercise. But just something to comment on what you were saying, or maybe question, because when I see the situation in the renewables and private investments, it does occur to me that suddenly the renewables will also become a status symbol, because only rich people can afford to invest 30,000 euros for the panels and for batteries. The energy poverty that is already there, how will you handle that? And also big players, they somehow feel, I have a feeling if I have my own solar system, then I don't need the big players. But what about the networks? I cannot have my own network, so they will still come in. So I think there are a lot of pitfalls that should be also considered. It's not just technology; it's again economic system and the attitude of people.
Of course, also as mentioned, energy obesity. We don't consume all the same. Maybe on the other side, we talked about production, but let's say also about absorption. A question from Dr. Potočnik. One possibility is to put monetary value to ecosystem services. So because nature absorbs our, let's say, waste and creates new resources useful for humanity. Is this, could this be a way?
Not the only one, definitely. By the way, if I just start from where Lučka actually ended, product passport, it's currently, which is basically exactly what was the intention at my times, that we would assign to each product that every consumer would have the possibility to follow the origins of the product and also the consequences of the consumption of the product, is something on which Commission is currently very actively working. It's in the pipeline. Many times, if I'm honest, if one is dealing with the environmental question, it gets a bit frustrated because you have so common sense arguments, but they do not simply come through. But on the other hand, suddenly a kind of critical mass is created for change, and the things do happen. And I do firmly believe that in politics, you are only behind time or ahead time. So it's very difficult to be in the real time. But going to the question which you have asked, Jure, it's about, so if you ask the question in a way like you did, is financialization the answer? It's immediately bringing a bit of negative connotation, because if you would ask, for example, the question in a bit different way, should nature be valued? You would also probably get another answer that then through the financialization, because I think it's first question which one needs to ask is, do we agree or do we think that market economy will remain to be a core mechanism guiding the production and distribution decisions in the future? And if that is yes, then it is also a simple truth that if you do not value something, you do not protect it. You simply don't value it. That is how the system works. We like it or not. And by the way, I don't like it. So I should always start when it comes to nature and when it comes to ecosystem services, that there should be an intrinsic value. And there is no doubt about that. And the question there, it's rather either and how it should be valued in the conditions of the market economies. If is destruction of nature, which is contributing to the higher profits, the right thing. And here I would dare to say that we would all agree that it's not the right thing. So something is wrong with the system, and it was already explained before by Lučka what is actually wrong. So hard facts are that not valuing nature inside the market economy leads to the situation we are currently facing, and this situation is certainly not something which we would like.
Yes, the question was a bit biased from my side, for sure. But we are approaching now the next topic, which is nature. And what I learned, this nature versus culture is very hot debate in anthropology and other social science and humanities studies. To my humble opinion and understanding, the source of idea of colonizing nature comes from the Bible. So it says, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish and the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground. So this is a bit of a provocation to initiate the debate, to reflect on the nature versus culture in the perspective of possible futures going beyond this dualism. Professor Mursic.
Yeah, I have to say that it is a very old debate which is not around in anthropology for quite some time. It changed radically and rapidly in past couple of decades with a new thinking which is turned around. We in Western Europe usually consider that we are living in the world with many cultures and one single nature, while people in Amazonia would think that we live in one culture and many different natures. So anthropologists are trying to understand this new perspective nowadays. But this is actually not an issue at all. There is actually no division between culture and nature, and what human beings have always done is nature, culture, unity. So when I was mentioning this Handex technology from ancient Stone Age, I had in mind that this piece of stone, which was carved, was both nature and culture, and human beings are since then, for 2, maybe 3 million years, the product of nature and culture. So we have nature, culture now as not only interchange, but one single, let's say, not unit, but a kind of a single occurrence. What came to my mind now is I will give now I will make an exercise now in terms of our capability of thinking beyond. So I will read now from, of course, Wikipedia, from where, definition of a company. A company, abbreviated as CO dot, is a legal entity representing an association of people, whether natural, legal, or mixture of both, with a specific objective. Company members share a common purpose and unite to achieve specific declared goals. Companies take various forms such as, now I will make a short suspense. Can you imagine the world without companies? Can you? Yes and no. No, we can't, because we live in the society in which companies are something normal, something existing, but they were not here from eternal times. 10,000 years ago, there was no company at all in the world. Even a couple of thousand years ago, there were no companies. Our species is 300,000 years old. So companies are around only for a couple of hundred years. So let me now proceed. The first form of companies is voluntary associations, which may include non-profit organizations. The second, business entities whose aim is generating profit. The third kind of companies is financial entities and banks. And the fourth is programs or educational institutions. Now, can you imagine that we live in the world where everybody here in this room would understand a business entity whose aim is generating profit? Think about it twice. It is completely stupid. it is completely out of our mind. What the hell? And how can we live in the world in which the majority of our life is led by entities created for profit? So this is an issue that comes to my mind as, well, we have to go much deeper into rethinking of our position. Nothing will help if we will take this as natural and understandable. It is not natural. It was invention of specific human beings, not so long in history, and because it was related now another part of the same story to power, it is sustainable in a way, and it is the most sustainable invention of them all we have in society. But imagine the world in which you would simply erase the second kind of companies. Then you would only have voluntary association, that means non-profit organizations. Then you would have financial entities and banks. We need them because it is the way how we create our future. And we have programs and educational institutions. Would the world be better? Everybody knows yes.
Thank you. I would go now back to physics, because on the end, energy and matter matters. We are all shaped by energy and matter around us, and it dictates the way we live, whether it's this built environment or food. One of the contexts for a question would be also that urbanization is expanding. More and more people are living in cities. So a question for Dr. Potočnik first. What do we need to do with our agriculture or food system? I'm sorry, this is a question for Lučka. So of course, what do we need to do with our agriculture and food system to be more resilient? Because we have more external threats because of climate change. But what can we do to supply enough food?
The problem is with the climate change, actually, it mostly impacts agriculture. And it's already doing it. It's not future, it's last 30 years. To put it very clearly to those who don't know really what climate change does, the places that are already dry are getting drier. The places that are already wet are getting wetter. So the majority of developing countries being dry, mostly dry countries, means that food production is seriously threatened. So luckily, the food technology or agriculture technology is getting better for the last 50 years. So we did a compensation with more knowledge and worse weather. We still sort of have the same amount food so far, but this will not go forever. And the lucky circumstance is that we produce regarding what we eat. So on the field to the fork, we lose half of our food. So we have to optimize. We cannot afford losing half of the food because of different reasons. It's in developing countries is because of the lack of storage facilities. And in the West, we throw food away. So food waste is a horrible problem in my view. So yes, we have to encourage those practices that actually value food as a gift of God, as we were taught as a children. It can be done with better organization. It would have to be done with a different form of subsidies, also help from developed countries to developing countries. So it is feasible. It's not a problem yet. But on the long term, because we are now 8 billions and very soon we will be 10 billions. So about these 2 extra billion coming, we have to find new solutions. So it's not just what I mentioned. It's probably really, we will have to eat less meat. So this is the also something that is inevitable. It will happen sooner or later. We can do it sooner because there are better reasons. If you talk to the doctors, I smoked for a long time, and then I had this carcinogenic list of things. And of course, cigarettes were on the first place. On the third plate, it was red meat, to my astonishment. So yeah, it's healthier not to eat so much meat. So this is another step. But from that time on, it's no silver bullet left. So sooner or later, we do both. We can withstand 10 billions.
They say I need to speed up the process, so go to the last part. This was inspired by a book I recently read from Renata Salecl, A Passion for Ignorance. We see that the ignorance and science denial is now getting momentum for quite some time. Reasons are complex, can be part also of the survival strategy. In one side is a paradox because we talk about knowledge societies, but actual knowledge is being closed in bubbles, or we are exposed to echo chambers. Intellectual property rights are closing this knowledge for profit or for market purposes. So I would like each of you to conclude today's discussion with some thoughts on what we know that we don't know, and how is this, and put this into a perspective of transition to sustainable societies and technologies. Who would like to start?
Okay, I'll do it. I have a whole list of what I know that I don't know. But yeah, maybe just emphasizing on the two issues. So first one is searching for some kind of solutions on how to implement political, social, or societal changes that would go in line with using less materials, less energy. So going in some kind of green transition, especially having in mind this, let's say, our kind of democracies where there are elections every 4 years and the decision makers are there for 4 years. So their long-term vision is 4 years, not century or something like that. And we see problems of climate change happening slowly. So if they see their term for 4 years, they think it's not a problem for them. They will not be there. The ones who will have to solve the bigger problems that will be in the future, and how to incorporate that into decision-making processes. So that's one. And the second one is related to the social and sciences and humanities as a whole. So we see physics, mathematics, where 1 + 1 is always 2. But in social sciences, humanities, 1 + 1 is 2 only once. So sometimes it's 11, it's -2, it's 1.99, and you cannot have the same results as you do in, let's say, technical sciences, natural sciences. You cannot predict the same results in the social processes. And speaking about change, it would be good in a way to do it, but of course it's not possible. So you always have this excess and so things that you don't know, but that will for sure influence the process itself.
Dr. Potočnik, maybe?
Sure. 3 quick points. First, a kind of reply to Dr. Mušić. I can easily imagine living in a world without company, but since this is my last contribution, I would just like to say that I could hardly imagine a world without discussing in such a good company. So thank you for being able to be invited in this framework, and I think it's a great debate. When you are asking me about, there are many things which we don't know, but I think that the major problem currently is that we know a lot, but we don't act on what we know. And the short-termism in which we are locked is simply leading us, if I can use the title of one of the super books of Arto Pasilina, to something like charming mass suicide. And that's actually not the direction which we would like to take. Lučka mentioned that limits of growth. Do you maybe know what was the amount of population when 50 years the limits of growth were released? It was just 3.8 billion people. So now we have surpassed already 8, so more than doubled in just 50 years. So understanding that we are simply not living in the same world as we lived 50 years ago, so that we are actually the first generation living in the socio-ecological space of planetary scope, where the only way that we can deal with those problems is better understanding each other, creating a fairer world and cooperating. If we don't want to do that, the future, of course, will be far from bright. But I hope, like also some of you mentioned in the panel, that we are intelligent enough, and I remain optimist. At the end of the day, optimists live longer and better.
Coming from the world of physics and modeling, it's a lot of things we don't know. And what's really worrying me about things I don't know is how far are we regarding climate change? Have we already passed the tipping points? I'm a bit pessimistic that we did, because what's happening in the Arctics, Antarctics, those are thermostats of our planet, and they're gone. So I would really like to know how late we are, but and the other thing, which is more social, from social point of view, is you mentioned that in the times of catastrophes, that after that people joined together and they were solidary and so, but there was a collateral damage before. So I'm just wondering how huge this collateral damage will be before we find the reason. We have science, we have knowledge, we have all the tools that this collateral damage could be minimal. But I'm afraid it won't be. So this is my biggest question, how big it will be.
Yes, I will follow here. I deeply agree with you. I certainly have not this knowledge. Other people from other disciplines have, but there were two issues which were not mentioned, but I find them extremely important in thinking about catastrophe we are approaching. The first is global inequality. Global inequality is perhaps the worst inequality we can have. We have, of course, inequalities in our societies which are absolutely unsustainable. But when we are thinking about global south and global inequalities, it is something we have to address. At the present, we have enough energy sources, we have enough food, we have enough knowledge, we have enough resources of any kind to assure a good, not average, living for each of these 8 billion people on the planet. We have reserve for twice more. It's not a problem in technical sense. It is purely political problem and nothing else. So the last one is, of course, one of the major sources of all kinds of pollution on this earth is military. We didn't touch it at all. And if we do not think about demilitarization of the planet, we are lost and doomed.
Thank you. With this, I would close our interventions and ask audience for questions. We still have a few minutes.
Hello?
I have many questions at all, but let's start with economics. We've before say polite environment, idiots. Idiot, go from my hand. That means idiot. But let's say concrete, from Crete Island. That means Chrétien. Oikos have 2 points, nomos and logos. To understand economy, must understand collateral damage. First of all, is new or all technology, we have many production factors: land, work, technology, capital. So if we don't understand the same legend, we can't really understand each other. That's the problem. To say relative or absolute part, maybe, but where are the real measurement criteria, standard? We say about old Bible that was pandemic also was in Mohenjo-Daro, 6,000 years before Christ, atomic clash. That is fact. We say about state, but don't understand Latin word status, which means for thing or object, and status, which means for person or subject. That's different. We can say about lucky, happiness, contentness. That's not happiness. Let's say two words, be and have. That means in French, être and avoir. If we say that is sustainable situation, we have no meritocracy.
Could you ask a question, please?
The question is, when we start with real factors, this is not real factors. The economy have many factors to understand, but the real problems are not that. The real problem is, let's say, scalar energy. Who knows what is scalar energy? The free energy from Faraday, from Tesla, and so on. The energy, at all don't know the name, Ein, Erk, Gea. That means the knowledge, the work, and the earth, the heart, or earth, the word. That's the simple. The history is turning out disaster, devolution. Why? Where is knowledge? Where is the science, conscious? That's the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Someone feels like to reflect? Okay. Some other interventions, maybe?
Maybe we can turn to the question that was posted in the chat. Is there any other way government can frame citizens than rational economic actors? If sustainability is framed as citizens' responsibilities to recycle, reduce energy use, etc., does it not disempower the people? This was one of the questions that maybe we can turn to.
Yeah, my personal answer would be obviously no.
If I can just add something on that citizens' responsibility, you know, asking citizens to act responsibly, it's the right way to go. That's no doubt. But as long as we are giving them the economic signals, for example, if you want to buy and you can afford more environmentally friendly and more healthy food, then you have to pay more. It's like you would in economic class say to the students, act stupid, and this will simply not work. So if we do not change the economic signals, which will send citizens in the same direction as their responsible behavior should be, we will of course have the problem. And by the way, it's not only linked to the citizens, it's linked also, to the consumers, it's linked also to the producers. But frankly, I agree with all the things which were said before. I also believe that dematerialization, it's one of the core issues. I also believe that the global north-south, it's one of the core issues, and these are all the things which we try to keep in our mind. If you look at from the point of view, what is the history telling us? The access and use of natural resources has been basically the core drivers of human histories and national well-being, but also conflicts and war. So, and we see it pretty much those shadows still in the today's world. So today's world is pretty much still in the shadows of this natural colonialism, as you mentioned it, in one of your sentences. And I think these are the core questions which we simply need to keep in mind.
Thank you very much. This is not a question, if I may, just a comment. So, especially to one of the talks of Dr. Potočnik, who mentioned the need of decoupling of economic growth and environmental pressures such as extractivism, consumerism, production, and so on. And apparently, as this is part of the conference, apparently we did tackle the right topic, because this was part of the first day lecture by Katja Winter-Mali, and she showed very clearly how the process of decoupling is absolutely needed in order for our future. But also today's lecture by Thomas Hilland Eriksson showed that this is possible, especially on local levels, especially with small projects. So instead of having the feeling of everything is going bananas, everything is going to doom, I got this very optimistic feeling after those lectures that we can rely on ingenuity of people all over the world. There are so many grassroots local projects that do tackle these issues of loss of biodiversity, loss of cultural diversity, and so on. So, although we, of course, also seek solutions on a global level, we shouldn't forget that people are already doing a lot to tackle whatever problem they can in their local environment, in their local life. So this is just a comment.
Yes, thank you very much. This is, of course, you get to think about so many different things, but I'm thinking now about energy specifically. And I heard you say that we must use less energy, or at least not much more. But then I know that there has been calculated by scientists at MIT that the power from the sun is about 10,000 times what we use now. So of course we shouldn't waste energy, we should be careful, but it sounds to me like a good potential. Or what do you think?
Yes, that's the potential, but I was speaking about the environmental aspect of it. So there's enough energy from sun coming to the earth. I think in one day there's enough energy for the whole year. But thinking in consequences in using this energy is how much of the materials you will use for the solar PV panels and other technology that might be used for it. You have to mine that, you have to transform it in various processes. And on the other hand, where you will put it. There are roofs, but not enough. So you will need to put it all around the place, all around the globe. You will need a lot of space and land for this. So I was speaking more in these terms, not in the terms of potentials, because there's a lot of wind potential as well, globally looking, but in a way of using this potential and source, producing the technology itself, and then putting it in place more in that kind of way.
Again.
One other observation, that the problem is all renewables, that they are very diffuse. They are per unit ground, the energy density is low. And there are such a huge differences between countries. So yes, in Africa or in Libya, you can do that easily, but living somewhere in the northern latitudes, it's just not enough sun, for instance. So this is, I guess, another problem in the we need space for something more. And my thought, what I actually wanted to say, I remember this also, the settlement how our settlements look like. Because when you have a cities, when you have 20 millions of people in a small place, there's no way solar energy can actually be of use for them. So yeah, it should be more polycentric than is today to use it properly. So it has to do with city planning as well, not just energy. Yeah.
I'm not an expert in energy at all, although I remember still calculations about energy from the sun from my deep past. What I have in mind is when I was mentioning these issues which were raised in the 70s about the future of the Earth, there was one estimation about if we reduce the use of electric energy for lighting for 40%. We would spare so much energy in European level that we will be good for, let's say, at least 10 years. So what happened? We are now using 90% less energy for lighting than in the 70s in this classical way. I think it is 1/10, something like that. The ratio, nothing changed. So whenever you have energy, you use it socially. You do not use it as individual consumer or as a unit of consumption, but as a society. And in social use of energy, things are completely different and messed up. Of course, in society, it is 1 and 1 is 2, always. However, the social use of energy means we use it as beyond our reach, the reach of our own, how to say it, possibility to influence it, even if we are in position of power in ministry of energy or whatever. We can't do it easily, different way as it is at the moment. But I will finish very optimistically. We still have, we are, since I was interested in physics pretty much in my high school times, and at that time it was a matter of a couple of years when we will have fusion. Fusion energy, which will bring us enough clean energy for the future use. Now it is 50 years past, we still don't have it, but I'm still optimistic that we will find better sources, or let's say sources of energy which will not be so costly as they are now. But if we would calculate it, I would always add social aspect in the cost. And solar panels are very costly actually in social sense because they are very egoistic.
Yuri, can I also say something? Thanks. 2 comments. One is, by the way, gentleman is of course right. We simply don't technologically master the whole energy which we are getting from sun. At this stage, it might be in the future that we will be in that position, but we are far from there. And currently we have totally different problems. And if we don't act quickly, we will simply, in the meantime, face such catastrophes that it's difficult to imagine them. By the way, I was the chief negotiator for the European Union for bringing the ITER, that is the fusion reactor, to Kedarash. And I very well remember the sentence that the fusion energy is always 50 years from now. So that was basically, ITER has not yet started with operations, but let's see what will be the result. But my point, which I want to underline here, it's another one. So, you know, people did not meet in Paris to craft the climate agreement because we have shortage of energy or because we have shortage of any other resource. They have gathered because the use of that energy and the use of those resources is creating such side effects that we have to tackle them. And it's actually not the shortage itself. It's sometimes the abundance of those things which are causing such dramatic side effects like climate change, like biodiversity loss, that we have to act. And this is the point which we should never lose from our mind.
I think this was a good closing remark. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, audience, and all well.